Hello and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy podcast. My name is Jed and we are in the Meno. That's the text we're reading together, and we are on the hunt for virtue. What is virtue? Does Meno know what virtue is? Well, so far in the text, it doesn't sound like he does, but our friend Socrates is claiming he doesn't. But even though he's claiming not to know what virtue is, and he's never met anybody who does, he is walking us through some interesting dialectics, or effective reasoning and conversation, arguments, conversation style, the very exercise that we are hoping to learn ourselves if we want to practice the art of philosophy, learn the art of philosophy. At least that's what we learned from the Phaedo and from the Parmenides. This is the exercise we have to do, the dialectic. So we're also learning about that as we go. And so far it sounds like virtue is an idea, an aspect of being that we have to keep our eyes on while doing the dialectic. So here we see a tie between the dialectic that we're learning and the aspects of being, or the ideas, one of which is virtue, which is curious. And of course that allows virtue to be the same for everyone. This is a theme in the series, this is a theme in our podcast, that what we're learning is universal. Everyone can play. You don't have to be divided among race, religion, creed, ethnicity, gender. Any of that doesn't matter, because if what we are after in philosophy is what exists eternally in the realm of being. Truth, it's called, or reality, or the experience or knowing of the self. Mind itself. And as all these things exist eternally in being, it doesn't matter what's playing out in the world of becoming, what humans are doing at this part of their history, if they're still fighting over old archaic prejudices or inherited false beliefs and prejudices. Doesn't matter, because it's open to all. It's open to all, and we saw that argument being laid out by Socrates for virtue. So Meno, with his what we might call modern view, or standard, typical view, that virtue is different for different people. Different races maybe have different virtues, or men had different excellence than women, slaves rather than masters. So the kinds of things that allow systems of inequality to exist, like capitalism, for instance, is a big one. Most people are slaves to increase the power and the resources and riches of a very, very small group of people who have no inherent extra art or skill or worthiness. That's just what they happen to be born into, a system of wealth inequality. And we say, well, there's a virtue for them. They get to do something different. They get to have yachts. They get to, what does it mean to be a good billionaire? Whereas us, our virtue is, the kind of stuff that they tell us through the media. And the education systems, to be on the grind set, to be a good slave, to work hard and subscribe to false beliefs that if you somehow make them richer, you will become richer. When of course, anyone who knows anything about money knows that that's the exact opposite. The richer someone becomes, the poorer everyone else becomes, because money is relative. That's why we have inflation. A dollar isn't very valuable if everyone has $1 million. Whereas if everyone has 10 cents, you are rich because you have $1. And so millionaires 20 years ago are worth multi-millionaires today. That kind of thing. So if every hour we work, we make some boss or CEO in some other country more wealthy, we're actually making ourselves poorer. Now, it takes some time to realize this, and that's where we are in our society. a lot of people suffering from poverty, or the cost of living crisis, as they're calling it, because we've been working very hard to make the rich richer, which ends up with us being poorer. Now we're feeling the effects, and it sucks. And it's just a matter of time, I hope, until people realize that you can't have wealth inequality within occupations. If every hour you earn $10 and your boss earns 20, you're actually making yourself poorer because you're making someone richer than you. And that's how wealth works. So we are taught that, hey, that's okay. They have an excellence. They get to do certain things. To be a good CEO is to, I don't know, try and not pay any taxes. Right? That's what's often said by the wealthy. Hey, we are clever and we have excellence if we can get away with not paying any taxes. So the multi-billionaires who are exploiting us human beings and our resources are lauded for not giving anything back, whereas the working class or the slave class, their excellence or their virtue is paying lots of taxes and working hard. Well, what's virtuous for them is to get their money to work for them. So the less hard they work, the more virtuous they are. The more hard the rest of us work, that's the more excellence we are. That kind of thing. Now, Meno has this way of thinking. Now, maybe because he's from a wealthy family. Might be part of it. At any rate, Socrates sort of shot that argument down. It can't be the same word if you're applying it differently to other people. So for there to be one word we call virtue, it can't be different for a man or a woman or a slave or a master. And an example, and that's the conclusion. The reasoning he went through is, hey, definition, what's it? It's an idea. It's something, an aspect of being, an eidos, that we keep our eye fixed on when we do a dialectic, or we try to imagine, try to turn our mind towards if we haven't yet experienced being. That's the dialectic. Meditation, kind of meditation and understanding and living and thinking all at once. The division of meditation is something different from the way we live is not needed anymore. If we realize that the best kind of meditation is a dialectic, and we are doing the dialectic anyway because we're always thinking, we're always talking with ourselves or with others, we're always reflecting on something. In fact, we are a walking dialectic, so we're always meditating. We're just learning how to do it right. So examples: health, size, strength. These are the same for men and women. Therefore, principle, from the many to the one, our conclusion. Therefore, all ideas in being don't change and don't differ, whether in men, women, slaves, masters, and that sort of thing. So that was our first run through. We are learning a lot about virtue, and we're learning about ideas. We're learning about the dialectic. The second one that Socrates went through was, well, how do we use virtue? Well, one of the descriptions Meno gave us was it's to manage well. Of course, he would say a CEO has to manage the people under him. That's why Elon Musk he's on the record saying the reason why he gets to have billions and billions of dollars and everyone else doesn't is he's very good at managing people. That's what he brings. That's all he brings. He's good at organizing and managing people. So that's what makes him excellent. That's his virtue. That's why he should get paid billions. Of course, it's baloney. It's copium, we would say. But Meno had that same idea. Men have to manage the city, women have to manage the house. So it's being able to manage well. That's how you use virtue, how it demonstrates or functions. So Socrates turned that into a dialectic. If that's our definition of how you use virtue. The next stage is demonstration. How does that managing demonstrate? How do you manage well? You have to have temperance. You have to have justice. In other words, you have to have a kind of order within yourself. Temperance. You can't be all over the shop. You can't be jumping off the walls. You can't be distracted. You can't be pursuing your everyday whims or your vices. That's temperance. Now, of course, famously, Elon Musk does that. He's very easily distracted. He pursues his whims, his prejudices. He's into Nazi stuff. He wants to buy Twitter. None of this is managing well. Gets into right-wing culture war nonsense. Doesn't have temperance. And the other thing in managing well is justice or fairness. And obviously, famously, Elon Musk and the other billionaires don't have that. They are not fair. They harm their workers. They fire all their employees and they want to hire them back without any benefits and a lower wage. They're unfair to the people who buy their products. People who buy Tesla cars or people who use Twitter. They're very unfair to them. Very unfair to his staff, of course. Who's another one who owns a lot of money, who has a lot of money? Lex Luthor, what's his name? The Amazon guy. Looks like Lex Luthor. Bezos, right, famously very unfair. The word is justice, unjust towards his workers. Working them to death, starvation wages, can't pause to use the bathroom, constantly being monitored, really running human beings into the ground, really the most tyrannical, unjust behavior. So they're not managing well. Even if we did buy into the idea that billionaires should exist because they're so good at managing, they are not ordered within themselves. They are intemperate. They're not sound-minded within. They're not well ordered. And they're not fair to others. That's capitalism. So this is what happens in capitalism, which gives you a definition of why capitalism is an unjust system and needs a system of tyranny that rewards and encourages tyranny. There is no virtue. Objective, that's not an opinion. That's just using the definition of how... Hi, welcome to the chat. Using the definition of what virtue is. So, definition, managing well. Demonstration, through temperance and justice. Well ordered within and fair to others. Okay, division. How do we divide that up in a dialectic? Well, the divisions, men, women, children, elderly, whatever it is they're managing, if they have temperance and justice, are they good? And if they are intemperate, wildly distracted or pursuing their vice, are they good? Of course not. If they're unfair, are they good? Of course not. So whoever it applies to, rich, poor, slaves, men, women, children, elderly, you need to be using temperance and justice. Now, from that division, we can come to a conclusion. We've gone from the many to the principle. See how we flowed in our reasoning. We defined it. We saw how it functioned. We divided that functioning up to different examples, many, how it applies to all, and now from the all to a principle, from the many to a one. Now we started with a one with definition, but now we have a new one. We see something new having gone through and unfolding. Now we can learn about reality as we go. Is reality an unfolding? If there is a first cause, must it be one cause? If what we are seeking in Platonism, the one self, if that's the one, and that's the first cause, why do we unfold into creation? Only to return home. Well, here we see by unfolding the one definition into a functioning, which unfolds further into all generation, all men, women, elderly, children. Now from that we return to we take everything and we bring it into a oneness, a new principle, an understanding. Okay, if men, women, children, and elderly all have to have temperance and justice, and if they don't, they're not good. Therefore, we can come to a principle through understanding. If it's not in being, in self, so if this virtue isn't in being or self, then people couldn't be good in the same way. So because we see people are good in the same way, doesn't matter who you are, if you're rich or poor, or if you manage 1 million people or none, you are good in the same way if you have temperance and justice. Which means it can't be something physical, it has to exist in being as a principle. So that's the synthesis. You've got a principle now, but that's not the end. We have to take that principle, that new seeing, that new understanding, and take it back to the start. Return back home or back to the one. Exactly, there would not be temperance if it didn't exist. And it couldn't function, and it couldn't unfurl into different people. So now we have to apply it back to our specific argument. Therefore, what was our first definition? Managing well. Demonstration, temperance and justice. Division, men, women, children, slaves, elderly. Conclusion, it has to exist in being for everyone to be good in the same way. Now that's something that we took out from the division. Men, women, children, they're all good when they have temperance and justice. So if being good requires it, therefore it has to be in being. Therefore, conclusion, this managing well isn't managing people like Elon Musk says, and Jeff Bezos and everyone who's trying to justify their hoarding of wealth and abusing and being fascist towards everybody else through capitalism. It's not managing people, it's managing yourself, managing the self. That's what virtue is. Because slaves don't manage people, children don't manage people, but they're made good in the same way through temperance and justice. Which is great. You don't have to be a billionaire to have excellence. Everyone is. So to manage it, yes, it is. It's both. The dialectic is pragmatic, very pragmatic, simple, usable, doable. But of course, sometimes pragmatic means only physical. But here, it's not just physical, it's everything. Takes you back to the non-physical. So therefore, our conclusion, the functioning of virtue is to manage the self with justice and never injustice. So you don't have excellence if you have injustice. And to manage well, it's not just managing well to make billions, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, it's managing yourself. And justly. So that was the conclusion of our second dialectic. Now that's where we are now. So we have our hypothesis. It seems like that first dialectic was a dialectic based on how you define virtue as an idea. The second one seems to be how it demonstrates or functions as managing. Now we know what kind of managing the self with justice and never injustice. So what follows after definition and demonstration? Division. So is Socrates going to give us a new dialectic based on how virtue divides? Maybe. That's exciting. Let's check in and see if he does. So that's where we're at. So thank you for joining us. Let's jump into the text and see if this is the case. Here we go. So let's go back to the start and go over where we are so far. So this is the end of the second one. So we have a new, this is what happens when you get to the end of dialectic. You go back to the start and you see what was there in a new way. So can we use that to understand the big question, why are we here if our goal is to return to the first cause? Making it the first and final cause. The analogy we use sometimes is the first cause of having a house being built is a need to have somewhere to live. Then you need the blueprints, then you need the builders, then you need the skill of building, then you need the material. But it's not finished until you are living in the house. So the same first cause is the final cause. Can we understand that better with the dialectic? We start with a definition that virtue is managing well, but now, after having gone through a development through the stages of the dialectic, we now realize it's not just governing, as Socrates says here in blue, but governing self and justly and never unjustly. Is that better? It's not different. This is another reason why we encourage people who come into this channel and come into philosophy thinking philosophy is about sharing your opinions. Yes, that's exactly how it's taught. That's exactly what Meno thinks it is. That's exactly how our culture thinks it is. Socrates says that's not philosophy, that's philodoxia, love of opinions. That's why we have problems in the world. Because opinions only deal with the sense world. And has nothing to do with truth. Elon Musk's opinion that he should be a multi-billionaire and everyone else should suffer and die, that doesn't have to be true for it to be an opinion. And some people share his opinion. We call them Elon Simps in our way of talking nowadays, at the time of the recording. But that's just because they share the opinion. They're bound together in opinion, bound to belief. That's the definition of what religion means. And Socrates says if you're just in opinions, you're going to have perpetual war and civil discord. But if you reach that which is true, then you can have a very different relationship with others and with yourself. You can manage yourself well in a just kind of way. Isn't that interesting? So what we're learning here is not just for our new discovery of what philosophy really is, moving from opinions to actual understanding about truth and being, systematic, practical, clear, simple understanding. That's also a meditation. So we don't have to separate our spiritual practice or our hour for meditation a day as something different from what we're doing at all times. Because at all times we're thinking. But are you thinking about opinions or are you thinking in understanding? Are you thinking about physical things that come and go? Or are you thinking about being that's eternal? And you might even get back to if you're doing the dialectic well. That's what Socrates calls, that's why Socrates calls it the true practice. Yeah, it's a reflection. In the chat can be seen as a reflection. Absolutely. We are reflecting a lot on virtue in a systematic way. Notice we're not fighting Meno. If we were reflecting on what it means to be good or excellence with regular people, we'd be probably arguing. And all you'd be doing is defending the opinions you were brought up with. The opinions of your parents, usually. Supported by your culture and religion, sure, and they only got it from their parents and their parents. And go all the way back. And no one along that lineage is Socrates. But here we're reflecting on it in a different way. Meno is like, oh, I'm not familiar with this way of reflecting and gaining truth. Socrates is like, yeah, let me show you. Let me walk you through it. And every step we come together. We agree at every step. There's no speech making or monologuing or proselytizing. On a Friday night where I live, there are people who have, I don't know what religion they are, but they have big signs about their religion and they're just yelling at people, hey, believe what we believe. And everyone's like, oh, this is very cringe. People are out on a Friday night to have fun, and here are these people trying to yell at them their beliefs. That's not very good reflection. But here we're reflecting together, gaining understanding. Even if we don't hit being today, we've at least understood more about what excellence is, and we've understood more about how to communicate it, how to reason for ourselves. So yeah, it's a kind of reflection with an open mind, unlike those evangelists yelling in the street corners. So it's an open-minded kind of reflection. We're curious. We're genuinely interested because we want to know. We don't want to do it because we look good. We look cool if we have the right answers. So what are we having? Systematic, ordered, by the way, ordered temperance, reflection for a sustained amount of time with an open, curious, wondering state of mind. Formally, those are the conditions for meditation. We are doing meditation. We are in the spiritual game while also in the understanding game, so we can bring understanding and being alive with spirituality, bring them together. They're no different. So if we realize that we are a walking dialectic, in that we are playing out the implications or the functioning and the divisions of whatever we believe is true, which is why we have to do philosophical midwifery to uncover what that is, so we don't just keep playing out the same story, the same problems. And we can also take the other side of that. Oh, we're a walking meditation. We are constantly meditating on something through the dialectic. We just don't know what it is, which is why we need midwifery to uncover what we are meditating on and play this game together to have a good object of meditation. So we could say, hey, if we're doing this, we are managing ourselves in an ordered way. That's temperance. And if this is our intended function, it's understanding and living and spirituality all at once. That could be our highest functioning, our proper and highest functioning. That would be fair or justice. Then whatever we're seeing here about managing ourselves with ordered temperance and our intended function justice may be what we're doing right now. So now we have a question that we can ask ourselves. Is this justice? Is this excellence? Is this virtue? Because we have a deeper understanding of virtue because of this reflection. Because of our meditation, our dialectic on virtue, following the logos of the text, word for word without interpretation, we have given birth to even deeper questions about what we're doing that we could never have asked if we hadn't realized that. What was the conclusion? Justice is managing the self, virtue is managing the self justly and unjustly. If we hadn't gone through this dialectic, we wouldn't have this new definition of what virtue is, which has allowed us to ask a new question. Hang on. If we're managing our reasoning, our thinking, our conversation, our way of being by learning the dialectic, is that just? Is this a just way of talking to people? Is this a just way of relating to ideas? So therefore, is this a kind of virtue? We would never have been able to ask that question. So not if we hadn't come to this conclusion. So not only do we go back to the start, we started with understanding excellence is managing well, but now we understand it in a new way, managing the self well, justly and never unjustly. So we not only have we got a new insight, a deeper seeing, we have a new question. And we love questions in this game, because what does questions allow us to do? Be curious, be open mind, contemplate and reflect. Do a dialectic on what it is that we're wondering about. It's a question. Fundamentalism, religion, any type of fundamentalism is bad in my experience. And now we can say why. It's not only your opinion that it's bad, we can see why. If this is necessary for learning, and fundamentalism says don't reflect, don't have questions, hold on to the opinions that you already have, no development of dianoia, understanding being, no development of dialectic, no verification in the experience of nous, no using what you have in a friendly, cooperative way with, maybe not cooperative, friendly, supportive, rational, beneficial way. There's none of that in any fundamentalist religions, because fundamentalism is to be tied to a belief. So this is all out the window. But now we can say why it is unjust. And we can phrase it in a dialectic, so it doesn't just have to be in an opinion. So we're really leveling up. So how does Meno respond? I believe so. Again, belief. For justice is virtue. Now the Greek is justice, dikaios. I prefer it over righteousness. Because it's more accurate. Okay, so a kind of conclusion. But notice his conclusion wasn't to agree and, oh yes, I understand. I see how beautifully and necessary that reasoning is. I'm with you. He says, no, I believe because of my own belief I already have. Because I already believe that justice is virtue, Socrates. So he's still stuck in his own beliefs. He's relating to his beliefs, not the understanding he's just gone through. So yeah, fundamentalism. So Socrates has to do something with that. Does he bop him on the head and say, hey, wake up, son? What, did we just waste our time? You're still tied to your beliefs. What about what we just understood? Does he say,
flibbity jibbity nonsense?
And does he say,
come on, man?
Or does he try and make him feel bad for not being as good a philosopher? Does he do what some people today do and say...
He didn't know what solipsism was. He didn't know what deontological moral philosophy was. He didn't know what utilitarianism meant.
And therefore he's dumb? And we're going to make fun of him? No. He takes what his statement was, his statement of opinion, and does what? Turns it into a question. That's what we try our best to do in this channel as well. It can be difficult because of the medium, but people often come in and out and they throw their opinions around and they're out the door. Like a child running into a room, throwing some spaghetti in the wall and screaming and then running away. Like, what about this mess you've just left behind? That can be a chat room sometimes. Well, we try our best to say, hey, no, stay a while. Can you rephrase that opinion as a question? Because now you're in a different kind of a game. One that might be more justice and more virtuous and more excellence and more beneficial for your soul. And the start of doing that is phrasing it as a question. Meno, Is justice virtue or a particular virtue? Notice also, Socrates is honing in on his problem. So the more Meno reflects, the more someone with an art can recognize, oh, this is your issue. What's Meno's issue? Is he talking about virtue or a particular virtue? It's the same one and many problem. Remember when he first said, oh, I can tell you what virtue is. It's managing the city well if you're a man, managing the kitchen well if you're a woman. If you're a slave, it's different. It's doing goodness to your friends and doing harm to your enemies and escaping ever getting harmed yourself. So, whoa, you've just given me a swarm of bees. I wanted the queen bee. I wanted a single one. You've given me a whole swarm. So again, is it the same problem? Are you stuck in the same kind of way? Have you given me justice? Have you given me virtue or a particular virtue? What do you mean by this? Says Meno. And now we're dividing it up into different arguments straight away. And he's walking him through the dialectic. Is roundness shape or a particular shape? As an analogy for, is justice a virtue or a particular virtue? So if there are other shapes than round, what are the other virtues? Meno says courage, temperance or sound-mindedness, wisdom, and magnanimity, magnificence. And there are others as well. Appear to be virtue. Notice appearance. What isn't the realm of being? Appearance. Meno, we're doing the same thing again. We've found many virtues while searching for one. We're unable to find the one that exists throughout the all. We can't return home. Meno's like, I don't know how you're doing this, Socrates. How do you do your search in this way? What is this weird game? And if you're watching this channel, maybe you're like this. What's this weird way of reading that you're doing? That's not how I thought you're supposed to read. I thought you're supposed to read as many books as you can because that makes you sound smart. Then you can go to people and say...
He didn't know what solipsism was. He didn't know what deontological moral philosophy was. He didn't know what utilitarianism meant.
See, and then you can win arguments by saying that because you've read a lot of books. This is very slow reading and very particular. And you're not talking about your own opinions at all. It's very weird. What's this way you carry out your search, Jed, on your crazy channel? That you can grasp one single thing that applies to all. Notice when we talk about in this channel, people's opinion, how do we deal with people's opinions? Is there one principle? Turning it into a question to open up the dialectic? When we talk about how this channel is different from other philosophy channels, that get more clicks. Is there one principle behind it? Or one principle behind the many differences? Well, yeah, we talked about how they're all love of opinion in the physical world. Is there one principle that's different? Sure, we're following the logos, which is why we have a big scroll up to the left. And only a small portion of the screen is my mug. Mug means face. So yeah, we try and go to principles as much as we can. But how do we do that? Well, I'm not aware of that. Of course you're not, says Socrates. But by the way, this line of inquiry applies to everything. Yes. Love of opinion. Damn, I have to note that one. It's too good. Yeah, good for you. By the way, if you want a fancy Greek word to contrast with philos sophia, which means philos, love, sophia, wisdom. Philodoxia. Philodoxia is a fancy Greek word that Socrates uses to mean love of opinion. So, Impress your friends with that if you want to use that one. For if someone was to ask you, okay, so this way that we're learning of thinking applies to everything, which is cool because we were just talking about it's a way of being that applies to even meditation. Everything. It might even be a single way of being that we can harmonize everything in our soul around. That would make us very well-ordered or temperance. And if justice is doing our intended function, then it does give us one function we can be doing at all times. So see how what we're doing? As we go, we're building questions. Yeah, I think doxia. Doxia, IA. Yeah. So we're building questions as we go. So when we say we're reading without interpretation, we're not saying we're boring dudheads. We're dusty old, Socrates says, bald-headed tinkerers. Dusty old bald-headed tinkerers, or we might say dusty old scholars up in our ivory tower. Nerds or something. No. We still put ourselves in the game. The word self is all the way through. We're learning about self. But we're doing it a different way. What questions come to birth for us as we go? That's different from how do we push our opinions and ignore what's there, like we say at school. What a teacher might say, what does this text mean to you? The
Come on, man. Flibbity-gibbity nonsense.
Well, you're not going to learn what the author is actually trying to say. But as we read, we can ask questions. How does it apply to us? How does it help us? Are we virtuous? How do we get virtue? If there's such a thing as virtue or excellence, how do we get it? So it applies to everything, even meditation. We've gone on to shape. Roundness is a particular shape. But color, is white color or a particular color? So again, division into another example. Then if you said that there were indeed other colors, and if someone was pursuing the logos just as we do, so what are we doing? As the dialectic, as living meditation, as perhaps well-ordered soul, perhaps justice, perhaps virtue, what are we doing? Pursuing the logos. I say perhaps because those are questions that we carry with us in our question sack. There's our question sack. See? Carrying around a big sack of questions.
You're a wizard, Harry.
That's us. Questions over here. What? Questions. Then, if they're pursuing the logos, as he does, as I'm demonstrating, we would arrive at many, but that's not the way for me. We don't want many colors as a definition. You give the many one certain name. Oh, names are key in this game. Words are key, which is why we're reading the Balboa translation. Notice, logos. Let's prove it, okay? Let's jump into one of the most respected, most well-regarded translations of Plato up until now, the Loeb or the Fowler. Pretty much the Loeb or the Fowler translation is A tier, along with the Rouse translation. They're both A tier. You have like the Jowett translation, which is sort of like C or D tier, but Fowler and Loeb are up there. Now, sorry, the Fowler and Rouse. This is the Rouse, Dialogues of Plato. I recommend this book to read it alongside what we're reading. And I also recommend the Loeb, which looks like this. There's a series that's green like this. But we have free version of the lobe on Perseus, so we can pull that up right now. Because it's interesting to see the difference. Just as we're seeing the difference between Socrates and Meno. Let's bring it up. So we are in 74D. If we pursued the logos just as we do, we would arrive at many. And let's just take that. 74D. Let me find it. Here we go. Look at us, we're in space. Ah. 74D. Now suppose, like me, he pursued the argument. Is that the same as logos? Now, argument is one definition, or no, a part. If you were to ask, so we've been talking about how would you define color? How would you define shape? If you define color as white or shape as roundness, you'd be giving a particular. Now, what's one of the questions we've been doing a dialectic on this whole series, this whole podcast? What the heck is the logos that we are following, that we are pursuing, that we are trying to master? If someone said, oh, let me tell you what the logos is, it's an argument. Is that a definition, or is that one of the divisions? Because the logos is also the paradigm of understanding. It's also the principle of the dialectic. It's also one of the ideas. So we're saying, hey, what's color? White. What's the logos? Argument. Argument is the very lowest. You can have the idea of logos as argument while still saying in the world of opinions, can't you? You can have an argument about opinions. You can stay in the physical world. Hey, you can have an argument in the physical world. But what about those higher aspects of logos? An idea, the paradigm of all understanding, the path we follow to reach our destiny, the principle and paradigm we use to our problems to free ourselves from problems. All of that gone out the window. So our translators of the Meno should be reading the Meno, because argument is just a particular aspect of the logos, and not only that, it's the lowest. Now this is something you'll find as we go. The translations we're given are usually only the very, very lowest. Sometimes not even that. So you never see the word self, because self, like logos, has many layers, 3 big ones, and they only ever give the smallest one. So that's an example. And if we come across another section of the text which has words like a bunch of them together, ousia, being, dianoia, nous, wisdom, idea, then we can compare it and we'll see how there'll be like 10 different mistranslations in the one sentence. So it's interesting. We can use the Meno to go back to our translator, who's passed away now, and say, hey, by the way, you should read the Meno, because argument isn't a good definition for the Greek word logos that's there. You are saying color is white, which is what? Logos is the word there. So interesting to keep in mind, because it's important to know where we're starting from as a culture and as a person, having been raised at this part of history. We're at that part of development where we are rediscovering or reawakening the logos. We've had the Dark Ages. After the academy was shut down and all of these texts have been burnt, there were 1,000 years of misery, and you couldn't read for yourself. Reading was banned. You couldn't even have a text. You'd be killed. really freaking stupid and insane. Now, insane isn't the right word because there is a reason for their injustice, a lack of the logos. So there is a rationality behind their injustice. But we are picking up the game and introducing justice and logos and temperance and maybe even excellence back into our game, in our souls most primarily, and within the culture secondarily. Be nice to do. Oh, how about this? Within our souls primarily, within our community and Discord group secondarily, and within the world tertiarily. Third. In the chat, I started reading a book with my native language. What is your native language, may I ask? And the Baba at the same time, and many things did make me have different interpretations of the text. The two books, The Republic. By the way, there's a special treat on Fridays my time. We have on the channel a Republic read-along with Mindy Mandel and the All About Platonism YouTube channel. So that's later on today. I'll put a reminder on our Discord when we're about to go live, half an hour beforehand. But it is, let me find the time. Yes, so at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, California time, and 3 a.m. Spain time, and 11 a.m. Brisbane time, we have a stream on this channel where we read along with the Republic with Mindy. You can join us live in chat. The videos stay up on my channel for about 6 days, and they're posted the next day on Mindy's channel. You can follow her channel, All About Platonism. Some fantastic material. There are many read-alongs. We're about, I don't know, 2/3 of the way through the Republic. So you can jump into the start of the book on Mindy's channel, All About Platonism. Check that out. Yeah. Or if you want to see my perspective of the episode, you can check in with my Twitch, and the videos stay on Twitch for about 6 to 7 days, I think. And it'll be a different background. The audio will be a bit different. Sometimes I'll pull up the Balboa text to highlight some different things. But yeah, you'll only have that for a week. Everything stays permanently on Mindy's channel. But yeah, extra bonus for no extra charge. So yeah, for everybody else watching on YouTube, 6 p.m. California time, Pacific Standard Time, 3 a.m. if you're in Spain, 11 a.m. if you're in Australian Eastern Standard Time. So what were we talking about? We're talking about the logos and how we understand it. So, naming is important. Oh, and that was an example of how important naming is. If you don't have a name for logos, how could you go on a quest to discover what it is? And literally, the name that we use to call them color, or to call them virtues, or to call them shape, this is the part of the logos. What part? Argument? No, not the argument part, the specific word part. Because another aspect of logos is words. The specific word that Socrates is honed in on, the turning point to turn the argument, is on a certain name. There is something that we already have that is one of the many. That's name. Naming, therefore, must be so important in the dialectic in the logos. I wonder why. So I wonder if there are any other significances to names as we go. Again, we love questions. We build questions as we go. So there's a certain name. And the certain name isn't round or straight, because round is more round than straight. But the name is shape. Round is not more shape than straight. So whatever is the name, it applies equally. You can't say straight is more shape than round, but you can say straight is more straight than round. So straight and round can't be the thing. Why is that important? Well, we've already seen that excellence or virtue applies equally to men or women or slaves or children. So there has to be something where you can say, so long as they meet the criteria, they can be given the name. So long as they fit within the category of shape or color or virtue. Managing the self well. And let's combine the two together. Managing the self well, justly and never unjustly, but also keeping your eye on the idea in being as much as you can and using it while asking questions and judging answers. Because that was the conclusion of our first dialectic. Our second one the conclusion was managing the self justly and never unjustly. But our first one was a single idea that we keep our eye on in dialectic or using questions and answers that doesn't change, doesn't differ. That was our conclusion. So can we add the two together? Are we building an image, an imagination of what virtue might be? Is that meditation?
Wow.
Wow. Wow.
Right. So, what in the world is this that we give the name of shape? The straight and the round, they're no more shape than each other. Please try to say, then if you responded in this way to the questioner, interesting way of going. He's taking his personality, his personal ego maybe out of it by saying, imagine two other people talking. Not me, not Socrates, of course, but a questioner. If a questioner, anyone, hey, maybe you, if you met Meno or someone, one of his ancestors, and said, or ancestors? Does ancestors come after or before? What's the opposite? What's ancestors but in the future? Is that also ancestors? Right, so the word is descendants. If you meet the descendants of Meno, or his way of thinking, you could be this sort of questioner. So if they were to ask you about shape or color, but I at least do not understand what it is you want, dear sir, I don't know what you mean, you'd be amazed. Don't you understand? I'm searching for that which is the same in all these cases. Now, those of you who have gone along with our first hypothesis of Parmenides recognize the word same, which is in blue, thanks to Balboa, our translator, is one of those key words, the key names within the logos. Same and different. Very, very high primary idea, or even idea, that we use in all thinking, in all creation. Everything that you see will be same and different to something. One of the primary units of thought that Parmenides uses in his first hypothesis to give a dialectic about his self. Who's Parmenides? Socrates' teacher. Wow.
Wow.
The book, the Parmenides, is often called the greatest book never read. For good reason. So, when we gain familiarity with certain key words within the logos, they will stick out for us. Certain key names will stick out for us. So this will help us. In the same way, once we saw that there are 4 categories of the dialectic, it made what seemed fantastical and magical about what Socrates is doing a lot more simple and easy to follow. Right? We're even able to do this. Look, on that one board is the whole thing he went through. Isn't that amazing? And then the next one he went through fits on another board. Look at that. See how easy it is when you have the structure? Now, we can gain an even more clearer understanding if we know within the dialectic, not only its structure, but within it, are there certain key words that he uses? Already we can see certain keywords. Hey, he's talking about, he uses the word, well, okay, he manages well. That's the definition, so that's where we start. But he uses these words. Okay, is that significant? And now he talks about if you have them, you reach the success, you are good. If you don't, you are failure towards the good. So he brings in the idea of good. His whole division stage is just taking the parts of the demonstration of the definition of what it means to manage well, the virtues, adding the idea of good. And his conclusion, it's in self. He brings in the idea of self. He brings in the same. So he's playing with good, self, and same. Are they significant? Can we gain a mastery of the dialectic by recognizing not just the structure, but the key terms he brings in with his thinking? The key terms he uses in his thinking. Is that significant? Well, let's jump back into the text. You don't understand. I'm just using this key idea, same. What's the same? I'm looking for the same in all of these cases. Same? Same. Really? Just same? Just same. Or would you have nothing to say, Meno, if someone asked, what is the same? The same? The same. Which applies to all, to the round, to the straight, and to all those other aspects, which you call shapes. Try to answer in order that you may have some practice for the answer about virtue. So this is a kind of dialectic that isn't following the usual structures, but it's following division. How can you do another dialectic? Well, how about you, if our theory is true, it's a dialectic on virtue based on division. Is he starting with division? How do we division it up into division into, that's a weird thing, into shape? Color. And he said, as practice for, what did he say? As practice for answering questions about excellence, or what we call virtue. So that's an interesting way of using the dialectic. Now you might recognize that also as analogy. You're having trouble with our past two dialectics on excellence or virtue? Let's divide it up. Let's do shape and color as practice. Is that what he's doing? I don't know. So try to answer. Meno says no. Meno says no. Meno says no. Meno says no.
What? What? That's one for the blooper reel.
But you go ahead and answer, Socrates. Now what's he doing? Is he saying no because Is he butthurt? Is he a bit sad that he's getting taught a lesson on how to think? Or could it be one of those situations? This is the fun we can have in this game. Apply it to your own situations. Have you gone through with someone who has a strong opinion? Oh yeah, this is what it means to be good, harming your enemies and good to your friends and getting away with paying no taxes and all that kind of crap. Being sexist, women are different from men, all that sort of stuff, or racist or whatever. And then you lead them through an argument with analogy. Hey, by the way, is health the same for, doesn't matter who you are, health is the same? Yeah. Do we have the same, the size or strength the same? Have you ever had a conversation with that and they realize the conclusions they're coming to in the practice, in the divisions, in the analogies, they realize, he's going to apply this to my opinion. Here's a good one, religion. You might have an analogy with someone about a religion that isn't theirs. Hey, by the way, when these people are just following a leader based on faith, believing what they're told because that was the authority that they were born into, but they're not using reason, they're not using evidence, and usually their beliefs are against reason and evidence, based on a text they never read themselves. Is that harmful for this religion? Oh yeah, of course. They're sheep. Look at all the harm they do. What about this religion? After you get maybe one or two analogies in, they might realize, he's going to apply it to my religion soon. No, I'm not going to play anymore. I see where you're going. Yeah, or maybe he's just lost in thought. Maybe he's just confused. Could be. Have you had an argument with someone like that? Okay, and this is what happens often on TV. You have a politician and they get asked a question. Hey, can you give me a simple yes or no? Yeah, okay. Do you support, let's use an easy one that's on the table at the moment. Would you, murder 20,000 Americans because of some crackpot American doing harm? No, of course not. Oh, really? Would you would you harm 20,000 Americans or murder them because of this crackpot if he was even part of a small group of people that did harm to other people? No, of course not. Oh, so do you support the genocide in Palestine? Murdering thousands and thousands of people because somebody else happened to do something that you don't like and they were in a group. Now, when that series of reasoning follows, often the politician catches on where they're going. Oh, no. Let me make a speech. Let me use my talking points. They have a right to defend themselves. End of conversation, because they see where it's going. Could be that. Could be that he's confused. Could be that he's lost in thought. We don't know. But it's interesting to wonder about as we read. Take them all with you as a hypothesis. No, I'm not going to answer. Try to answer, says Meno. What is the same in the round and the straight that we call shape? Yes, us versus them, right. That's very interesting. So we talk about inheriting our prejudices from our family. Well, they inherited it from their family and from their family. If you trace it all the way back, it goes back to our earliest evolutionary conditions as human beings. Before we had logos, before we had language, when we were living in caves, it might have been very dangerous to venture out on your own with your own independent way of thinking and your curiosity, because you might be eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. So the people who survived learned a strategy of blindly obeying the tribe leader within the cave and not thinking for yourself, not asking questions. And so you were given an idea, everything outside the cave, bad and scary. The others, all the other caves, all the other animals, all the other outside world, bad, evil, wrong. Inside cave, good. Outside cave, bad, scary. Now that was a kind of solution that allowed us to evolve, but no longer applies now that we have language and logos. So as all problems are what? Solutions that formerly worked that no longer apply. Same too for our own individual false beliefs that cause our problems that we explore in our philosophical midwifery channel. So yes, in-group, out-group, as you say. Us versus them. Right. Inside cave, good. Whatever my race is good. Immigrants, bad, scary. Other nations, bad, scary. People who think different, bad, scary. The radical left. The evil immigrants. Now, fascists always appeal to that problem from our evolutionary tradition. Hey, the real cause of problems isn't wealth inequality, which is caused by capitalism, which is an irrational, unjust, fascist system of oppression that is unsustainable and will leave everybody suffering in poverty and the destruction of the planet. No, no, no. That would be rationally reflecting on the causes. Actually, ignore all that. I'm going to prey on your prejudices. Inside cave, good. Outside cave, bad, scary. And say, oh, the real reason that you're suffering is the poor, the most exploited, impoverished people that look different than you. The ones who can't defend themselves because they don't own big media companies like we do. And you don't have to be very clever to notice somebody who looks different. Any idiot can see appearances, but it takes some temperance, it takes some justice, it might take some virtue to reflect in a cooperative, friendly way on causes. That's the dialectic. It takes a bit more virtue, which is why the fascists try and keep you away from the conditions of orderedness by threatening you with starvation, threatening you with poverty, threatening you with war, threatening you with scary images on the television. Because we want to get away from that to be supportive. There's no debating between Socrates and Meno. There's no fighting. There's no fear. There's no arguments that make your skin crawl. We are creating a fun, pleasant, encouraging environment, which are the conditions for dialectic. And dialectic is that rational, reflective reasoning upon causes to understand and solve problems. In other words, becoming rational. What's sometimes called entering the human race. Moving from barbarism to Homo sapien, man the thinker. Entering the human race. So, it's important to realize the causes of this us versus them, inside cave good, outside cave bad, scary, cause of all of our problems. And it's also important to realize how it demonstrates itself in fascism or ignorance or in-group, out-group. Yes, why are they entering our cave? Go back to your cave. And then you throw a spear at their face. Or a rock. And it's also important to recognize not just the cause, how it demonstrates, but its divisions. How it's used in marketing, how it's used in politics, how it's used in all sorts of ways to get people to move away from the human race, move away from reason, move away from what Socrates call it, pursuing the logos just as he does, into division, war, discord, and being stuck in a problem that is playing out through history. Therefore, we could conclude from that reflection, if we can say that there is a cause, if there is a cause that we can name and define, inside cave good, outside cave bad, scary, that demonstrates itself through history and divides up into every area of our society, politics, marketing, education, and so on. Hey, they still teach capitalism as normal and good and right in universities, even though everyone who's been on YouTube for more than half an hour researching it knows that that's bullshit. It's a lie. So if it divides up into our institutions, if it leads to a conclusion that we are all suffering, we're all finding it hard to live, we all can't afford basic needs that can be very easily provided without almost any work, given the resources and technology available. We can be free from work completely if we only approach things rationally, but instead we have super billionaires exploiting everything and destroying the planet, and 99.9% of the population serving them as slaves for no reason. And if we take that and we bring it back to the start, inside cave good, bad, outside cave bad, scary, leading to the destruction of caves. No more caves, because capitalism and fascism ends with a destruction of our entire planet and species. If that's the case, we are playing out through history a dialectic of what happens if the Logos doesn't exist. So in the dialectic, you have what if X is, what if being exists, that's part A, and you've also got part B. What if it doesn't exist? If not exists. So you could say, what we are learning on this channel is, what if the Logos exists for us, for our souls, for our conversation? What if it exists in our relationship with Meno, with our friends? What if it exists for our problems? Can we master the Logos and dialectic to remove our problems? What if it exists for our other channel, our other series, understanding music? Can we understand through the Logos music as a complete system? That's a reflection of the Logos. So if we are doing that, what if the Logos exists on this channel, and therefore reawakening philosophy? Very exciting when we say the name of the channel, right? Very exciting. Just like when people were watching that film Get Out, a scary film, when the evil ghost said, "Get out," everyone in the cinema went, "Hooray!" He said the name of the film. Well, we all get very excited when that happens. So we are reawakening philosophy, or discovering or being ourselves a walking dialectic, a walking meditation we were concluding today, of what happens if the Logos does exist. We can say we're doing that in a history and a culture that is a dialectic historically of what happens if the Logos doesn't exist. So lots of injustices, lots of tyranny, but you could take a step back and see it as a whole and say, actually, if we are immortal as souls, and if we can look back on the experience of humanity, we might say that there is a kind of fairness or justice, because we are being shown through time and space and human culture the implications of what follows inside B. These are the stakes. This is why it's important to subscribe to this channel and support this channel and whatever, because the stakes are what follows in a dialectic that you are anyway. You're already a walking dialectic. Do you want to be a walking dialectic if the Logos doesn't exist? Well, here's the last 3,000 years of history. Or 2,500 years of history since Socrates, let's say. You want to do that? Because that's your soul. Or do you want to play a new game? So we can come to a conclusion. Therefore, historically, human society is nothing other than a dialectic of what follows if the logos doesn't exist, meaning the next stage of human development or our soul's development, because we happen to be born here, maybe for a reason that we picked this part of history and this part of the planet, and where you had internet and you can log into this channel. We are here to realize the stakes, side B of the dialectic, and learn side A. By the way, it's not a dialectic unless you do both. So you could say your life up until now has been a dialectic of what follows if you don't have the logos. Now this is the turning point, or the call to adventure.
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
Where you discover and you play out the rest of your life if you choose to pick up. You don't have to. It's always an invitation. It's always your choice. You have a choice of being completely different, playing something completely different and new, reawakening philosophy, and having the rest of your life be a dialectic that shows you in real time, indirect experience, the dialectic of what follows if you do have the logos. Speaking of the dialectic, okay. So, got a question in the chat about souls. Different opinions about what the soul is. Interesting to hear. Let's see what they are. Something like substance dualist. The mind and matter are fundamentally distinct. Right. That's an interesting question. We are reading the Meno. The Meno is someone who is asking Socrates the question, can virtue be taught? And the idea of virtue is the excellence for a person. He thinks he knows what virtue is. All of his descriptions have been in the physical world. So he's only been able to give adjectives. The virtue for a man is managing the city well. A virtue for the woman is managing her house well. That kind of thing. But Socrates says, hang on a second, I don't want descriptions, that's many. If I asked you, hey, what's shape? And you said, oh, shape is round and straight. No, those are things within shape. If I asked you what color is and you said, oh, white, you're giving me a particular. Now, the realm of particulars is the physical world that we see through our physical senses. Socrates says, okay, let me walk you through it. The excellence or virtue is an idea. An idea is an aspect of the realm of being. It's like a different dimension. That's the cause of the physical world. So we have a world of being and a world of becoming. Have we drawn it up yet? Here we go. A physical world of becoming and a realm of being. Now, the realm of being is usually what we are interested in understanding in philosophy. That's what makes philosophy philosophy. Otherwise, it would be science or something like that. What is the realm of being? What are its aspects? And how do we understand it, number one? How do we understand it in a way that prepares us to experience it? What's it like to experience it? That's death, separating your soul from the body. So Socrates says in the Phaedo, hey, philosophy is nothing other than the art and practice of death and being dead, dying and being dead. So what's it like, separating your soul from the body? What is the significance of using understanding as your preparation? So there are lots of different traditions that try and separate the soul from the body in various ways: mantras, meditation, chanting, drugs, displays of energy, using your ki in battle. All of them we call yogas, because all yogas have at their core how to separate the soul from the body. But what's the significance of going through understanding as your method? That's what we're learning, the dialectic. How do you understand in a really cool way that's simple and clear, and you can use it in conversations with your friends, so that when you use dialectic as what Socrates calls the exercise of philosophy, to experience this realm of being. In Greek, that's called nous. We don't have a word for nous in English, by the way. So we need to use the Greek word. We're sort of hamstrung if we don't have it. But the experience is called nous. What happens if you have, and by the way, understanding the realm of being is called dianoia, another fancy word that we don't have in English. Oh, here we go. So we might say understanding the physical world of becoming, the particular world, understanding. So these are our triads we've been developing as we read the text. So none of this is my opinion. This is all stuff we're getting from Socrates. Using a new translation which has the actual Greek and the actual words translated properly. Up until now, all of the translations of Socrates have been using the words understanding, which usually means the physical world. So here we have two triangles. The particular world, or the world of becoming, the honorific, or the world of being. You can understand the particular world. You can have knowledge of things in the particular world. I know how to ride a bike. But that's adjectives, a beautiful thing. So all of the words that we seek knowing, like what is beauty, what is justice, in this particular text, what is virtue, we only see as examples in the physical world. A's. We need to ask what's the. We need to go from to the. Now, our European academic tradition is Latin, which means they don't have the word the. So they've been literally hamstrung by a language that doesn't have the word that allows them to do philosophy. So they've been replacing philosophy with opinions. Socrates calls it not philosophia. It's not wisdom or a kind of experience, nous, understanding, dianoia, together in the realm of being. You might call that wisdom, or sophia, philosophia, love of wisdom. You know, they have love of opinions, philodoxia, which is this world here. So we're not interested in a beautiful thing. We start with the many, a beautiful person, a beautiful dog, a beautiful painting. But then we have to ask the question, hang on a second. If these are particular things, what's the thing that gives them the name that's the same in the all? What's the one that's same in the all? Three simple words. One, same, all. Now these are key words within the logos. The logos is another word that hasn't been translated up until now, but it's in the Greek. I'll show you. Logos. Socrates saying, hey, you should pursue the logos like me. Logos. Or that's actually N, logon. But it's from the word logos, logos. So this translation allows us to read for ourselves in a way that we haven't been able to do since the Dark Ages, where if you had a text, you'd be killed. And it was in Latin, usually a language you couldn't read. You couldn't read this. Now, in that Latin tradition, we have translations that don't have these keywords. But thankfully now we have a new translation that's free. You can find a link below that allows us to read for ourselves. We don't have to believe anyone else. Even if they have a religion, even if they have all the political power, doesn't matter. We have the internet. We can read for ourselves. And we can see what Socrates is saying. So, is there a one that's the same in all? Many beautiful things, what's the one that's the same? We call that self-beauty. Self, one of the words that hasn't been translated before. Hello, welcome to the chat. Good to see you. So that's what we're doing. We're moving from the particular world to the world of being. Now that is also called ousia. And we have that within ourselves. Sometimes people call it the third eye. the ability of mind to turn away from our physical senses and to experience itself directly. That's also a yoga, or separating the soul from the body. The very practice of philosophy, as Socrates says in the Phaedo. So, the soul has to separate from the body. That allows it to enter the realm of being, but that's not the end of the game. That's just the beginning. Literally, it's the beginning. Now you're in philosophy. Because just because you've had an experience of it doesn't mean you understand it. And you could be afraid of it. So we also have to be using the logos that we're learning to, in this, we have this series on YouTube on philosophical midwifery, to free ourselves from our false opinions. If you grew up in a tradition, in a family that says, oh, you can't separate from the body, that's where the demons live. Oh, evil spirits will get you. No watching Harry Potter in my house. Then if you are having that experience, you might have what's called a bad trip. Because of your false beliefs, flee from it. Or in reincarnation, flee back into a physical reincarnation. So we need to be using an understanding of the logos to purify our false beliefs, as well as develop an understanding. That's our transition in, but that's not the end. We need to make sense of what we experience. That's the next level. And then, hey, if there's another level, if there's even a cause of the realm of being, how do we take what we've learned to get here to go to the higher level? That's the first hypothesis in the book called the Parmenides. So that's a bit of an introduction to this kind of a game. Yes, so mind and matter are fundamentally distinct. Well put, yes. Matter, mind. And one idea of soul is that which allows our mind to rule or guide our physical matter. Now, the way in which we guide our physical form, that's the subject of finding Meno, the text, the Meno that we're reading. Because the way in which we guide it, that's called virtue. We can take this mind in our body and say that there are three aspects. You have the part of your psyche that has inner desires. You want sandwiches. You want some tasty coffee. And in this channel, we have a fun game. It's a lot of fun. When I say coffee, we have a sip of coffee, because philosophy ain't philosophy without some coffee. We have fun here. So there's our inner desires that want some tasty coffee. There is a part of our psyche, our mind or our consciousness, that wants to move outwardly, wants to go do stuff. So that's sometimes called that what? Represented, so our snowman, the inner desires are the biggest part of our psyche. It's the most prevalent. Most people are guided by their desires. So what we discover about our soul, we can apply to the whole, apply to society, as above, so below. That's the principle of reality that allows for us to have metaphors, as above, similar relationships below, but different terms. So what we see in the world of becoming, we can use to wonder about the realm of being, with the guidance of Socrates, of course, who's gotten there and gone beyond there. So as above, so below. So just as the inner desires is the biggest part of our psyche, so too our society. So some people are interested in philosophy that's called love of riches. You want to make the money, make the dollar bills, y'all. Philoklimatos is the Greek word for that, if you want to be fancy. Some people are motivated by this part of their soul, their heart, not their belly button, but their heart. Outward moving. They seek fame. They're the ones who want to get popular and famous, be the big kid on campus, or Instagram famous, Insta famous, right? Philotimos, love of honor. Philoklimatos, love of riches. Now, we are special. We are interested in understanding or reasoning. Now, the Greek is actually the word logos. There's a part of our soul that is the logos. It's the top, it's the smallest part. And those are the three parts of the soul. If we are organized where our reasoning part rules the other parts, that's a kind of even-temperedness or temperance or sound-mindedness. That's one of the virtues that we've been talking about in the text. How we use the logos in our movement, that's courage. Because everything we learn is going to be different than what we believe. That's why it takes courage to be in this game. Your upbringing, your prejudices, your false beliefs about yourself that you inherited through your family, your culture, your religion, your ancestors, all the way back to the caves, as we were talking about today. Inside cave good, outside cave bad and scary, the kind of way of thinking that allowed our species to survive before we had logos, before we had language and reasoning. That's going to feel familiar and comfortable. Therefore, if your reasoning part is guiding what you do outwardly, that's called courage. What we're doing by reading the text, pulling out the keywords, seeing, by the way, the keywords we can call the logos, pulling out the structure, putting it into a structure, that's the dialectic. To understand being, that's called dianoia, understanding being in this kind of a way, which is a kind of contemplation or meditation. That's nous. That's what we're doing in this series. So that's a little bit of an introduction. And yeah, so well put. Soul is kind of like mind, different from the body. And all of those three virtues together we call justice. So that's where we're at. And Socrates is saying, hey, what is virtue? What is the excellence? And we came to a conclusion that if it's managing well, it can't be managing other people well, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos. It's managing yourself well, because everyone can have excellence. Anyone can have virtue. And to do it with justice and not unjustly. Jeff Bezos, right? That's not excellence. You're unjust in how you manage yourself and others. And Socrates, and he asks, hey, Meno, are you okay with this? Well, yeah, I'm okay because I already believe. So he's in the realm of his opinions still. I already think that justice is virtue. And Socrates says, is it a virtue or the virtue? The same puzzle. How do we go from the particulars, the many, in our physical world of becoming, the particulars, the many, the physical world, how do we go from that to where we're seeking? How do we separate our soul from the body? How do we get there? And how do we get there? Through reasoning. That's where we're at. Good question. Thank you for the question, Daniel. Now, one way of going is through analogy. If I said color and you said white, is that color or is that a color? Is that the color or a color? Again, the and a, same issue. You can summarize all Western European or Western civilization with two words, a and the. That's it. Our whole tradition for the last 2,000 years have been following a particular, a virtue, a color. And all of the wars and injustices and in the inability to have reasoned reflection with the leaders, the inability for leaders to become philosophical, the inability for leaders to find the truth, the ability for us to demand that of our leaders, the fighting over particular opinions, particular objects, physical wealth, oil, resources. Everything you can say is nothing other than what follows if you are in the realm of A. And where did we leave? When we left Socrates behind, we left the realm of the. And we are coming back to the realm of the. And Socrates is helping him. By the way, can you please try to answer so you have some practice for when I ask you what's the virtue, not a virtue like justice or temperance, but what's the virtue? Can you go ahead and please answer me what is shape? And don't say a shape. Meno says no.
Flibbity-gibbity nonsense.
And we get mad at him. And we call him not a philosopher because he doesn't know complicated words. We say to him...
Have you read Brand at all? Have you read Nagel? What about Scanlon? Have you read Scanlon or Scruton or Edmund Burke? Have you read C.S. Lewis? Have you read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe? Have you read Immanuel Kant? So you know Pflicht.
What has this got to do with Bob's Burgers?
Do you practice self-love in a Kantian sense? Do you masturbate to Kant? Have you seen Infinity Wars? Have you even seen Age of Ultron?
So that's what we would say because he got it wrong. That's my new favorite sound drop. It's a bit long. No, we don't. Let's see what... That's what we would be taught to do if we were in the current tradition. That's what he's making fun of there. But let's see what Socrates says. Meno says, no, you answer. Socrates says, do you wish I do this favor for you? Are you asking me to do a favor for you, buddy? Is that what you're asking? Meno says, very much so. Socrates, then will you be willing to tell me about excellence? If I... Very cool. Alright, I can tell you're stuck. Because you don't know how to answer a the question. So Meno is in the same situation we are in as a society. The. Can't do the. So I can see you're struggling with giving a the for shape. But if I do shape, will you do excellence? Will you do virtue? He says, yeah.
Sneaky. Sneaky.
Sneaky. Now then, one must be willing, for Socrates, says Socrates, for it is worth our effort. And to us, those following along, if you come along this far, congratulations. So if you're following along, congratulations, well done, and it's worth our time. So a big round of applause for you. Now, a tiny round of applause because if it's worth our effort to do all this, which is different from our whole culture, our whole tradition, hey, go down to the pub. How many people are doing this? How many people are bringing their Balboa translation of the Meno down to the pub? So it's effort. It takes those virtues and stuff. So if it's worth it, the payoff is probably going to be pretty big. So I don't need to give you a big round of applause because the payoff is going to be even bigger. So I just give you a little one. I mean, that's just a theory.
I don't want to eat a monkey. I don't want to eat a monkey.
If you're not eating monkeys like Joe Rogan and you're actually doing this, the payoff is going to be big.
But hey, that's just a theory.
Is our theory. We have to wait until we can see whether or not it pays off. Meno agrees, very much so, worth our effort. Come along then, says Soc. We will try to explain to you what shape is. Hooray. Then consider if you will accept that self is the following. Big word self helped us out with our translation, putting in pink, which means you have the ability to do that 3 levels of reading. One more time, let's give you an example. Then we must try to explain what shape is. Then consider if you accept that it is the following. It. See how it fits? The particular. We're talking about particulars a moment ago. This same triad that relates to realities or levels of being, levels of dimensions of reality, also relates to altos. It. Physical. Particular. Ah. So we can also do the second level. Can we apply it to the honorific self? And the very, very mysterious one, can we apply it to the ultimate, the one or the good self? So every time we see that word, we have an opportunity to play that game. Let's try it. Let's do we just did the particular one. Consider if you accept that it is the following. Consider if you accept the self of shape is the following. Different level of reading, pal. And folks, and then the highest. Will you accept if the one self is the following? Oh. How does that fit? Hopefully it doesn't. Hopefully it's confused and puzzled you. Good. It wouldn't be much of a twist and a question if it didn't. Keep that puzzlement alive. Keep it as a question. Just as Socrates turned Meno's opinion just as his virtue into a question. Is it virtue or is it a virtue? A versus the. Okay, let's try and explain what self is. For surely let it be in this case for us. Shape is the only one of the... Whoa! Good thing we were doing the honorific reading, because now this next part will make sense to us. It's the only one of the truly existing beings. Wow.
Wow. Wow. Wow. Wow.
Let's highlight that. Yep. Which always happens to follow color. Interesting. So he's saying it's a being, and this is what it does. This is what makes it separate from the other beings. Does that suffice for you? Now, this is how he's using his knowledge. Are you with me? Look how friendly he is. Does that suffice? Or do you search in some other way? For if you were to speak about virtue, excellence, in the way I spoke about shape, then I'll be well pleased. Notice, every stage of the dialectic we say, are you with me, pal? Just like before. Hey. Excellence is a single eidos in being. Are you with me, pal? No, let's go on. This is how it demonstrates. With me, pal? Not really. Okay, let's divide it up. Are you with me? Yeah. Conclusion? Yeah. Final conclusion? No. Okay, let's move on to the next one. See how you can use it to bring your friend along? There's no debate or fighting. No need for wars or weapons. So John Lennon's song, Imagine There's No Wars in Countries, he's saying, imagine what happened if we learnt the dialectic. Someone should send him an email to let him know that. Or do a sequel to his song. Okay, are you with me? Because if that was sufficient, if you followed along, you're aware of the beings, you're aware it's the kind of being that follows color, and if that's sufficient, then you can use that as a principle to apply it to virtue. What's the principle? Well, virtue must be a truly existing being. We've already seen that earlier. But what kind? It always happens to follow what? What is the distinguishing feature of this truly existing being in the realm of being? The honorific version of self, that means a truly existing being. It has a selfhood. That's our twist reading that we did before. Lucky we did. That was handy that we demonstrated that a second ago. Because then you can use it to answer about shape. Okay, now let's compare. See how awesome that was? Truly existing being. The word self allowing us that level of reading. Now let's compare it. We are on 75, just before 74C. What? Why is it 75? It should be 75. There's a typo there. Yeah, 75. For 75C. Let's compare it to what human beings have been working with. Was anybody else able to discover that cool twist and problem and puzzle and insight? Let's see if they could do it with what they're working with up until this translation. In space. Okay, what were we on? 75C before that. Okay, here we go. Then if I agree to answer about shape, you will answer on virtue. Meno says he will. Well then, I must make the effort for it's worth our while. Come now, let me try and tell you what figure is. Just consider if you accept this description of it. Figure, let us say, is the only existing thing that is found always following color. Okay, let's hear that again. Let me tell you what it is. Just consider if you accept this description. Figure, let us say, is the only existing thing that is found always following color. Let's compare it to what we read. I will try to explain what shape is. Let's see if you consider that self is the following. Uh-oh.
Come on, man. Flibbity-jibbity nonsense.
What in the heck are we talking about here?
Uh-oh. What are we missing? The word self, right? Not there. Kind of a biggie, isn't it? Considered everything is being is a selfhood, and the ultimate is the one or good self. Quite a thing to be missing. Okay. Just consider if you accept this description of it. See, notice? Now this is a principle. When we go into these past translations, they only ever give the it. They never use the other two. They only ever have Grandma's way of watching Inception. Sorry, Grandma, to use you as a analogy here. What is it? Particular. It. Literally, it's the word it. They only ever give you it for altos or self. It ain't it. It's also the honorific, self-beauty, self-justice. Look at it. They only give you the particular, which means they're the kind of thinkers like Meno who are only in the physical world of becoming, which means our translators are not philosophers. By definition, they're only interested in philodoxia or the particulars. That's where their understanding is directed. That's where their translator is. So we're learning from people who are completely off the mark. And using the analogy for watching a movie, there's the first level of reading, the particular, it. That's how Grandma watches the film. Then there's the twist. Socrates ain't interested in this. Literally, every dialectic has been saying, hey, being has to be in this for it to be able to apply to people, to men, to women, to slaves and things. To manage. It has to have its own existence. For us to reach the good. So, all of that, literally everything Socrates has been saying has been removed from the very dialogue that is supposed to be our way to understand what Socrates is saying. Isn't that interesting?
Flibbity-jibbity nonsense.
Have you read Brand at all? Have you read
He didn't
Nagel?
know what solipsism was. He didn't know what deontological moral philosophy was.
But hey,
That's one for the blooper reel.
Okay, none of the sound drops really fit, but still, isn't that wild? Literally, we've been trying to learn about Socrates with a text, with all of our text, literally rejecting Socrates' side of the arguments without us even being able to read it. Hey, you don't need to read what Socrates says. I know better. And by the way, I side with Meno. How wild is that? Our translators have been siding with Meno, the very guy in ignorance Socrates is demonstrating the dialectic to help. Isn't that wild? That's kind of why I started this series, by the way. Now, because you're a clever and handsome boy, says your grandma, you are interested in this twist. Grandma isn't. Grandma is reading philosophy the same way everyone up until now has been. But you're a handsome and clever boy. You realize there's a twist. Or, with the word altos, there's a higher reading. But also this is within the analogy of a movie. There is a third level of meaning within the film too. And that's a level that maybe Socrates isn't talking about, but is hinting to that you have to do yourself. Notice he's not lecturing Meno, he's inviting him to play. So if we have to do this, he might be inviting us to play. So it's a good description. It's good to see. Good to know where we're starting from. All right. So what is the shape? It's one of the beings that follows color. Wow, always. Is that sufficient? Oh, let's see if he how the word truly existing beings is translated in the past. It is the only existing thing. Is a thing different from a truly existing being? What grade, if you were his teacher, what grade would you give this translator? Well, what grade would you give him, I wonder? So, is it a thing? Nope. It's kind of the opposite. That's kind of why Socrates came along and said, I gotta teach you guys something. Very curious world we find ourselves in, right? So, can you use this? By the way, is this a definition? A truly existing being that follows color? Are you happy with just the definition, or should I go on? So we can even anticipate. Well, if we see that the dialectic is also how we use conversations, then maybe we can guess that Meno is going to say, no, I'm lost. And then we have to go from a definition to a demonstration, an example of it. And then if Meno says, I'm lost, we have to divide it up. That's just a theory.
Have you read Brand?
He didn't know it.
But hey, that's just a theory.
Let's see what happens. Right, existing being that always follows color. Is that sufficient? Can you answer using the same structure, same pattern? Can you answer about virtue? Meno says, but this is indeed a simple-minded answer, Socrates. Not only is he saying no, he's really like, he's a bit butthurt maybe. That's stupid. You're dumb. That's simple-minded, Socrates. Hey, maybe simple-minded isn't an insult if you see it simply with your mind. Back is sore today. What do you mean, says Socrates. What do you mean? Because shape, let's highlight this because it's funny. Simple-minded, Socrates. What do you mean? Because shape is in some way, according to your logos, that which always follows color. But then if someone were to say that he did not know what color is, then we're in the same difficulty, just as they have been about shape. Well then, what do you think you would have answered? The truth, says Socrates. That's a bit... What's that? Mean? Clever? What is that? What would you answer? Oh, I'd answer the truth. Okay, I hope you keep going. And if the questioner were indeed one of the wise ones of the heuristic antagonistic kind. Now, I don't know what heuristic antagonistic means, so let's go on a quest to discover for ourselves. Eristikon. What does eristikon mean? Eager for strife or battle, fond of arguing, or sophistry. Interesting. See what Wikipedia dictionary says. Aristikos. Quarrelsome, gruff, grouchy, crusty. All right. So we know those sorts of people. Heuristic. Want to fight. Debate bros, we call them. Pretty much everyone who is a philosopher who isn't doing this kind of philosophy. They like to fight. They like to antagonize. People who have a philosophical background and come into this chat, some of them come into the channel, they think that philosophy is being a dick, arguing, being a crusty, grumpy, old, grouchy son of a bitch. This is what I think. What do you think? All right, I'm out of here. See ya. Wait on a second. No, thankfully, the majority aren't like that, but there are those people because that's how they're trained. There is no truth in school. By definition, they're not in the. So what's their standard for truth? How well you can argue or debate or put people down so you can get your degree or you get your tenureship or you get your clicks on YouTube. So crusty and argumentative or agonistikon. What does agonistikon mean? Fit for contest in speaking. Eager for applause, contentious. The art of combat or contest. Debate. Debate. Right, debate. There we go. So, very apt. So we call people haters, we call them debate bros, we call them annoying. So did Socrates. Hey, if you're one of those grumpy, argumentative kind who likes to debate, that's what they think philosophy is. And hey, we're not blaming them, we're just naming them. Because yeah, that's the education system. If they don't have a paradigm for truth, Dianoia Logos Nous, what makes you true? How you can win a debate? How many politicians are interested in truth? Zip. Big fat zero. How do they win? Debates. Oh, let's watch the big presidential debate. How well can they lie to us through their arguments and debate in media? Lawyers, are they interested in truth? Or winning arguments? Right? Again, we're in a dialectic of what follows if we are dropping the ball Our society is nothing other than a dialectic played out through history of what happens if we don't do our jobs. Learn the logos. Reach truth. Discover our destiny. Therefore, the next stage has to be to pick up the game, which is what we're doing here. So good for us. Right, so if you are the grumpy, argumentative, and debate kind of hater, then if you're that kind, then I would say to him that on the one hand, my answer has been stated. But if I did not state it correctly, it is your work to take up the logos and refute me. It's no good just saying that's a poor answer. Where did you lose? Where did you miss the mark? What aspect is wrong? Same thing we do in this channel. Someone will come in and say, hey, that's wrong. At what point? Where? What part did it go wrong? Where do we lose you? Where are you stuck or where are you at? Whereas, if we were friends, okay, we are friends on this channel, and we choose to be discoursing, is that dialectic? Let's make sure that's not dialectic. 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 Is dialectic? Sounds similar, but dialectic is woof, not that. Practice dialectic. Elicit conclusions through discussion. Discourse and reason. Oh, hello, hello, hello. Converse, discuss. To use a dialectic. Right, so the word discourse also means here dialectic. So that's key. Let's put that in purple. If we were having a dialectic with each other, which is interesting because that's what we're after. Just as you and I were now doing. Oh, so he's really helping us. He's saying, hey, that's what we were doing. We're doing dialectics, by the way. Then I must reply in a more gentle way. So if we want to be a dialectician, we need to do this. So maybe the gruff way that I was describing heuristic and antagonistic people, bitter, angry haters and debaters, might not be as gentle as I could have been. And I'm off the page. Let me bring this in a little bit. So be gentle. Hey, it's okay with your racism. Let's talk about it. And more in the way of the dialectician. Oh, that's a good word. He's really dropping some bombs on us right now. The way of the dialectician. How do you... What's that? Dialectico teron. Dialectico, dialectic, teron. Way of the dialectic, dialectical teron. Skilled in the dialectic, dialectically. Yes, okay. The way of the dialectic, dialectical teron. Is that P or T? Dialectical. Teron, T-E-R. That P, what looks like a P in Greek is an R. Dialectical teron. So, what's the way of the dialectic? If we are here to master the art of dialectic, that's our job, if that's the meaning of our existence, the purpose, it is gentle. Oh. Thus, the more dialectical teron way is not only to answer the truth, but equally to also proceed by means of those premises. Whoa, okay, let's highlight all this. Okay. So, if you're in the game, it's not about winning, it's about the truth. Number one. Number two, to proceed by means of those premises, which the one who is questioning acknowledges they know. Interesting. If you're a questioner, then you acknowledge that the person knows certain things. Like, Meno knows what color is. And he goes, hang on a second. You saying that shape is the existing being, the eidos, that follows color, that's simple-minded. What if I don't know what color is? Well, I know you know what color is. Not only are you supposed to answer honestly, Meno, you're supposed to follow the premises that the one questioning acknowledges you know. Don't lie. Like someone who is a heuristic and antagonistic. A hater and a debater. That's a good one. Hater and debater. Don't be a hater and debater. A filthy stinking liar. What we would call a grifter. That's the currency today. Everyone needs to make that dollar because of capitalism. And they get audience locked. Grifting. Hater and debater. So anti-logo, Socrates calls them. Right? So don't play nonsense. Surely this way, this is the way in which I shall endeavor to converse with thee. Equally so. Hey, both parties. Me too. I'll play. I'll tell the truth. I won't pretend I don't know something that I do. For tell me, which is interesting because Socrates says, I don't know what virtue is and whether or not it can be taught. Is he telling the truth? He must be. What does it mean then? Because he seems to know a lot about virtue. What the heck is he doing? What's he talking about? He doesn't know it. Then what's this? Is this knowing or something else? Tell me, do you call something an end or a termination or boundary? I mean, such as the following example. A limit or an extremity. By all these words, I mean that it is the same. Although Prodicus may perhaps differ with us. But you would certainly describe something as having been bounded and having been completed. This is what I wish to say, nothing complicated. Meno, but I do so describe them, and I believe that I understand what you mean. Okay? Is there a boundary to something? Now let's make sure we know what boundary is in the Greek, because our translator picked out 3 different words. Telefin. What's telefin mean in Greek? Telefin means woof. Accomplish, finish. Fulfilled. Finish, accomplished. End, bring to an end. Or completion, accomplishment. Termination, end of anything. All right, so there's an end or a completion. That is the telefin. Oh, like telos. Telos is the end or the completion, the goal, maybe our destiny, what we're here for, our telos, what's our purpose. Well, telefin is the end or a boundary of something. So, the limit or the extremity. So it's a geometrical term as well. So the limit of a plane is a line kind of thing. Or the extremity. The extremity of a line is a point. Kind of geometrical things that Prodicus might be into. So he would differ for us because he might have a specific definition for the end of a boundary in a line or a shape or something like that. Prodicus. Let's make sure we know who this guy is. Prodicus is a Greek sophist. Linguistics and ethics. All right, so he might get caught up in technical linguistics here. Nevertheless, we're not interested in him. What we are describing as something has been bounded and having been completed, the boundary of something. Right? Meno says, sure. I understand what you mean, and I'll describe him that way. What next? Okay, yeah, plane. Here we go. Talking about planes, good guess. Do you call something a plane and in turn a solid like they do in geometry? Ooh, what a coincidence. I do indeed call those things by those names. Now then, out of these admissions, you may already understand what I mean by shape. Ah, so that's why he's going into boundaries. Normally when we talk about a limit or an extremity, we're using it in geometry to talk about the boundary of a shape. Every shape has to have a boundary. This part makes it a rectangle, has this thing. So the boundary or the limit or the extreme of a square is a straight line, that kind of thing. The definitions that you would give if you were doing geometry. So you know what a shape is, that which is bound by an extremity. Actually, let's see if Euclid has a definition. Because Euclid has a system of geometry and he has a list of definitions. Not that one. Okay. Euclid is awesome. He has a system of complete geometry that uses 23 definitions, 5 postulates or things you can do, and 5 axioms or things that are obvious that you use. So you just use those definitions, those 5 things you can do, and the 5 axioms, and you can create all of geometry. It's pretty wild. But let's see what he talks about with a plane. A plane surface is that which lies evenly with the straight lines on itself. That's all we're after. We want extremity. The limits of a line, the ends of a line are points. Now that's not a, see. It's very important to get the actual text. See, that one isn't. Here we go. Oh, come on, this is not the thing. This is a European way of giving a summary of the thing. We want the thing itself. Definitions. Oh my goodness. So we found Euclid's Elements of Geometry on Perseus, which is very good for being very accurate. And here is this is why. What we read in the second, I think, hit on Google, which has Euclid's Elements of Geometry, has his book. The ends of a line are points. I was like, that doesn't sound like the kind of language that Euclid would use. And thankfully we have Perseus and we have this one, which is the actual text. And it's significant. So even in geometry, we have a problem within our society that we don't value people whose use of the words is so precise, like Euclid or Socrates. Why? It's not the ends of a line, it's the extremities of a line. That's what Socrates has been talking about. The extremities of a line are points. Now he is saying a shape is that which has a extremity, having been bounded and completed. Every solid is bounded. My explanation will apply to every shape, says Socrates, for that by which a solid is bounded is shape. So I'm putting it together. Shape is the very boundary of a solid, okay? Shape is a boundary of a solid. I don't think Euclid gets into solids, at least in his definitions, but let's see if we have something similar. The extremity of a surface are lines. There we go. Extremities of a surface. A surface is that which has length and breadth only. This is really cool, by the way, to get into. Different angles. A boundary is the extremity of anything. Oh, there we go. So Socrates says it's the end, the termination, the boundary, or the limit, or the extremity. Same kind of thing. A boundary is the extremity, so that's Socrates as well. A figure is that which is contained by a boundary. There we go. That's what we're after. Socrates is giving Meno definition 14 in Euclid. Does that mean Socrates is familiar with Euclid? If I was a guessing man, I would say yes, and we are a guessing man. We are guessing men because that's a hypothesis. So, a figure is that which is contained by a boundary or boundaries. A boundary has been defined in the previous definition. There are only 23. That which is the extremity. So a figure is bound by an extremity. What does Socrates say? You want to know what a shape is? Hey, a limit or an extremity? Well, not complicated. Do you call a plane like we do in geometry? Oh yeah, he does know geometry. Then you know what a shape is. Oh, plane. Okay, so he's also familiar with planes. Let's jump back into Euclid. A plane surface is a surface which lines evenly with the straight lines on itself. So you know what a plane is? That's what a shape is. It's a plane. Are you familiar with definition 7, says Socrates? What a plane is? I do indeed know what a plane is. Okay, so let's highlight plane. Yep. Okay. So you know what a limit or extremity is? That's definition 13. A boundary is the extremity of anything. That's what he's saying. You know what a plane is? That's definition 7 from the 23. No, you know what a shape is? Out of these admissions, so he's doing Euclid, he's walking him through the stages, like the definitions. The definitions build on each other. Now the whole thing builds all the propositions he makes using the definitions build on each other too. That's Euclid. Socrates is using geometry to show us, the reader, what he's doing with the dialectic. Just as Euclid builds his arguments through the definitions and then through his creations or propositions, he makes a triangle, he makes and he uses the triangle. He builds. Just as we build in geometry that they're familiar with, so too Socrates is building step by step through definitions together, bringing someone along, just as Euclid does in geometry. Socrates is doing it for ideas, not in the physical world like geometry, although technically geometry isn't in the physical world either. You never have a straight line, you never have a point. We infer it from the physical world, but so too do we infer the ideas in being, like the existence of virtue as an idea, necessarily. Socrates is helping us. So that might mean that it's worth us on this channel getting into Euclid at some stage. So we'll put that on our to-do list. But Might be worth doing because Socrates is saying that's what I'm doing. So, you know definition 7. A plane is a surface that lines evenly with the straight lines on itself. That might sound complicated, but you can unpack it if you want in your own time. It's not really needed. Just to know that they are both familiar with definition 7 of Euclid, that you can find on Perseus, by the way. Look there. The other translations that I found just then were rubbish. Do you know what a limit or extremity is? Oh yes, Socrates, that's number 13. A boundary is the extremity of anything. Therefore, bring them together out of the admissions that you already understand. What I mean by shape. Out of that, I can do shape. For my explanation will apply to every shape. So he's saying, look, what I'm explaining isn't particulars, but the principle. All. The principle applies to all. Just as being applies to all. For that which is solid is bounded. For that by which a solid is bounded is shape. That sounds very much like the way Euclid talks, if you've ever gotten into his game. So putting that together, okay. So steps, number 1, what you've already admitted. Number 2, reaching a universal. Number 3, his development. You know what a solid is, you know what a boundary is. I'm using that together to get shape. Now, number 4, putting that together, conclusion. 1, 2, 3, 4. What has 4 stages? What has 4 parts? Is it a coincidence that the dialectic we're after has 4 parts also? Maybe, maybe not. Out of what you've already understood, reaching a universal, pulling the parts together, applying it back to the start. Or rather, the arguments and then putting it together. Shape is just as a boundary of a solid. So what's shape? It's the boundary of a solid. Now, a figure is that which is contained by a boundary. That's literally, he's giving him definition 14. Socrates is using the word solid. That isn't in Euclid. And it's not in Euclid probably because he's not dealing with solids, it's 2-dimensional geometry. But you could say a shape is that which is bound by an extremity. A figure is that it's contained by any boundary or boundaries. But he's adding a little bit. Solid. So he's showing us what he's doing, he's showing us what it's like. Euclid, showing us that it's built up systematically, together. You have to be telling the truth and not be a curmudgeonly, bitter, anti-logos hater or debater. But also he's showing he's adapting it. Solid isn't in Euclid. So he's taking what's like Euclid and he can adjust it. Because we're not doing Euclid here. We are talking about things that you see. So you can talk about solids. So, similar, following the steps, building together, taking your conclusions, applying it, going from the many to the universal, using what you've already admitted to already, bringing it together, putting it all together to make a conclusion. That is adapted to meet the specific person you're talking to. So we can use the word solid. It doesn't have to be the same for each person if you follow the principle. Then what do you say color is, Socrates? Oh, you're indeed overbearing, Meno. You task an old man with demands for answers, since you are unwilling to recall to say what in the world self is that Gorgias claims virtue to be. After you have answered this for me, Socrates, then I'll tell you to do it for... So what's color? Hang on a second. Socrates said, hey, you know what color is. Don't play dumb, that's not the game. By the way, I can define what a shape is. Here we go. Using what you've admitted, you know what an extremity is, you know what a plane is, you know geometry, you know those definitions. I'm going to go to the universal that applies to everything. Here is a definition. Here's the putting it together, or synthesis and analysis. Here is a definition of what shape is. But what about color? Oh, come on. You want to go back to color? You're giving an old man some work. Come on, I'll tell you what virtue is if you apply this to color. So I don't know if Meno is trying to catch him out, or if he's just eager to see a demonstration of this to something that's more easy for him to see, color and shape. But cool that Socrates is helping us out. Because we are. I don't know if Meno's open-minded, but we are. We want to learn. So he's really laying it out there for us. He's really giving us a masterclass in dialectic here, which is cool. And Meno's response is not, wow, that's amazing, Socrates. He's like, hey, can you do color? You are overbearing, Meno. Come on. I'm an old man, says Socrates. Where does he go from there? On that cliffhanger, be sure to tune in next time. Another bit of a long one today. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for joining me in the chat. Thank you for the questions. Feel free to like and subscribe on YouTube. Join the Discord so we can give you notifications when we go live on Twitch and YouTube. If you want to support the Patreon, you can. If you want to donate, there should be a link somewhere soon, I hope, to donations if you're willing to, if you feel, do you want to support the channel in that way? Thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you next time. With some wondering questions about what the heck is going on here. What's Meno doing?